all of the presenters in this session. If you look at your schedules, you'll see that we have another session that's starting now, and we're starting like late, and that's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll have lots of time because there's actually like an hour of other time right at the end. That what I'm going to suggest is that we go until the coffee break, so half an hour. And then we take a break, and then we come back, and we'll have lots of time to talk about support groups and kind of wrap up other questions that you have throughout the day. So don't feel pressed for time because we're okay. We plan for this. Sort of. Not really, but it'll work. We'll be okay. Yeah. So we'll do. We're going to go for 30 minutes, take a break, and then come back. So we won't finish all of the support group session. We'll come back and finish it. So if that's okay with everyone, that's my proposal. And I have the mic, yes. So if you don't like it, you can come and wrestle me. So what we want to do is talk about support groups. We've talked about conferences. We've talked about legal advocacy this morning. We've talked about political action. Support groups is kind of where it gets down to the street level. It gets down to things that happen for your family and the families that you interact with in terms of what can you do to get support from on an ongoing basis. What we find over and over again is that homeschoolers, particularly homeschool moms, feeling that they're not doing enough and saying, I want to quit, is not abnormal. That's normal. And to deal with that, support is needed. So we want to talk about support to home educating families through support groups. What can that look like? And want to have some diversity and some different examples of how that can happen in various places in various ways. And we've got, I think, some excellent examples of being able to talk about that. We haven't talked about the order here, so I'm going to be creative and kind of make it up as I go along. But I'm going to start with Leigh Bortins. Leigh, if you want to come up, Leigh is the founder of Classical Conversations, and Classical Conversations is a program, but it really builds on being a support group in a significant way. So Leigh, and would just really, first of all, I want to thank you for your sponsorship of this conference and for your support of international homeschooling. And your program is one that has been just very, very successful, and I think that's because people are getting support through it. And we'd like to hear about how that model is working, and just be able to share that as one of the principles.
All right. Well, thank you for the time. Can I get a show of hands for the non-American, non-U.S. citizens? U.S. Yeah, you know what I mean? Okay, so, all right, thank you. And it looks like, 3 have headphones. All right. So, my name is Leigh Bortins. My son, Robert, is handing out our Classical Conversations catalog. Generally, when I go to meetings, I don't really talk too much about classical conversations. I talk really more about the classical model in homeschooling. But since this is a leadership conference and you're trying to know about how programs work, I thought I would give you more of like the business side of things, because we do support homeschooling families, but we also have a kind of behind-the-scenes model that's really our passion compared to what's out front. So let me explain that a little better. At least the Americans here, who's heard of Wells Fargo? It's a bank, right? But it started out with Pony Express shipping. Right, so it's one of the few companies in America, or the United States, that has been operating for a long time. And it's because they really knew what their mission was. They weren't the Pony Express, and they don't think of themselves as a bank. They think of themselves as protectors of money. So they kept their mission back when they were transporting money in a stagecoach to now when they use vaults and electronics. So I find it really important that if you want longevity in a program, to really be sure that you know what your mission is. So Classical Conversations, our tagline is that we're about classical Christian community. And what we find is people join us because they want the community, they want the accountability, they want the support. Once they're there for a while, they realize that the classical model really is an efficient, inexpensive way to educate your children. And what they really appreciate is that from the Christian perspective is our leadership is Christian. Anybody of any religion or belief can join classical conversations, but not anybody can be a leader in classical conversations. So when I'm speaking to business people who don't care at all about homeschooling or Christian education or classical education, I describe what we're doing as a K-12 educational services company. Because on the face of it, that's what we look like. We sell curriculum, we develop curriculum, we do conferences, we do training, right? We do whatever it seems like a classical educator might need, we do. But if you stay with us for very long, you find out that that's not our real mission. Our real mission is well, I shouldn't say that's not it. Christian is the main thing, but what's behind that in our mission is conflict resolution, reconciliation, and leadership training. That's what we spend the most amount of money and time on. So people who come and want our programs and come and go, and there's a lot of folks like that, they never really learn that about us. That our heart is to show people how to live well together. And academics is one way that we as Christians learn how to do that. It's one way parents teach their children how to live well, is through studying together. And so our method and our model is classical education for homeschoolers, but our Christian worldview is primary to what we were about. And even though, well, so let me explain to those that don't know what classical conversations is on the public side, is we have support programs where parents attend once a week with their children and work on classical curriculum together. So the students are not our customer, the children. The parent is the one that we're working with. But in order to practice teaching classically, they bring their children with them. And so we have no desire to usurp the parent's role in being in charge of the children. We want to be friends and helpmates and partners with each other in this thing that's very difficult called home education. So one of the ways that we emphasize that besides our programs is in our training. And so what we do is throughout the entire summer and then periodically throughout the school season, we have training programs for our staff. And so, and for tutors and for parents, we do a lot of training. So they just had a wonderful conference here talking about how to put a conference together. That was really helpful. That was really wonderful to hear, and you should get that list from the Apologia people. So from our perspective, this is what we've been about. This past summer, we had 438 conferences that we put on. 42,000 parents attended for 3 days. And instead of having a conference like was described, we have only 2 speakers and 2 topics. It's very focused what we do. Anybody can attend. It's absolutely free. And what we focus on is 2 things. 1, what's the classical model of education? What does that really mean? And then 2, we pick a different topic every year. So it might be science one year, or how to write, or Latin, or logic. But it's focused, and people come to spend the 3 days to actually get a boost in more in depth and more focus with a bunch of people around, because it's very nice to learn with one another since we're as adults too. So with the 42,000 parents that came for 3 days, on 438 conferences. We also attended 130 conferences that we did not put on. So we are all across the United States, and we have a very loyal following that's willing to go work pretty much. If there's an event, somebody will show up. We do things like MOPS, Mothers of Preschoolers, and we do book events that have nothing to do with homeschooling. If someone will go to an event and speak for us, we say, here's some materials, feel free. Go. What's it going to cost? And we try to work that out with them. So because of how our focus is on the parents, our parents are very loyal to us. We try so hard to help them understand what we're about, and then they can do what they need to do with their children. So we have a 70% retention rate, which is very, very high for any kind of academic program, let alone a very difficult classical Christian program. And that is because we have such excellent dedicated tutors who go through so much training throughout the year. So they not only attend the 3-day parent practicums, they have various books they have to read, they have monthly conference calls, and then they have one-day events throughout the year. And they're just very dedicated because they know if they can learn how to teach, who will benefit? Their children. And as Christians, we're always trying to help one another and serve one another. And so they all have servants' hearts in that sense. And so because of the hard work of all these homeschooling mothers and fathers, we have 94,000 seats, 94,000 students show up for our programs across the United States and in 12 other countries. And we trained 16,000 tutors in the classical Christian model of education. So as much as we love the children and we love the families, what's almost more important to us is that since homeschooling is so difficult, that we focus, that somebody be focused on leaders. Who is in this for the long haul? And so even though on maybe a commercial, like if you look at our catalog, from a publicity, a PR perspective, we are always trying to tell people about what we do and encourage them to look at our services and participate and use our products. But what makes us happiest and makes us know our mission will last and last and last is those 16,000 parents who come back day after day, week after week, month after month, because they want the training that we provide. And the number one thing that they like, they're glad we have Latin and math and all that other kind of training, but what they like is the best, is the thing that's the hardest, is conflict resolution. They want to really love their neighbor and love their children and love their spouse and all those people that can be hard to love sometimes. And so that's what keeps us motivated and working so hard and going to so many events each year. And so I'd be happy to talk to any of you in other countries who want to know, how do you reach the committed people? Because we've had a lot of conversation about just getting the word out. And you need to do that, right? We have to do that too. But how do you sustain the ones that are transitioning from new to keeping them be leaders? That's what I think we do the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leigh. What we'll do is have a question and answer time at the end. And what I'd like to do is flip to another part of the world, and let's, Joy, can you come up? Joy Mendoza. Now, all of the speakers in this session are all homeschool moms. So support and support groups is a significant, it's really focused on very much the moms. Others, dads come along sometimes, but it's really a lot about the moms. Yes, it's on.
I feel like I should have gone before she did because that was really intimidating. But we're not doing thousands and thousands in our part of the world with that kind of thing. But I'm just going to talk to you from the heart of a homeschooling mom. And one of my burdens when I started homeschooling was, how can I reach other mothers and encourage them to do this? Because it was such a wonderful experience for our family. And to just kind of talk to people about it or give seminars about it wasn't as effective as developing personal relationships. And so for us, at least with, can you read that? I'm sorry if it's kind of blurry. We started off with like a play group because it's very easy to say to your friends, your peers, hey, why don't we get together with our kids? And these are young children. Moms are really motivated to get their kids together with other children. It's just something that they value, social interaction. And so I would say, why don't we get together? Let's go to the park. Let's hang out. And then we just talk. And then they start asking me about homeschooling. And so some of these were my friends, but then they would invite other friends. And then our play group grew. And as it grew and as our children moved up in their levels, then it became necessary to do something more structured. I'm going to talk about that in the co-op system. But with the play groups, it's really informal. It's open. People can invite other friends. You can invite other children. It doesn't really matter because you're not doing anything very structured. It's just basically hanging out together and providing emotional support for the moms. And then you can do activities within that. And here's an example of we had some firefighters come and explain that to the children, and they love that. Now, setup requirements, you're going to need an initiator, someone who's really passionate about gathering parents or families together. And then an organizer. Like sometimes you can have a person who is passionate about getting people together but not very organized. And so you're going to need somebody who's good at contacting people and keeping them informed about changes in activities or schedules or venues. And then since it's a lot easier for us today, you don't rely on cell phones anymore. You can use a social media app to stay connected. And that way during the week, even if you're just meeting maybe once a week or twice a month, during the week the moms are still connecting with each other and asking each other questions or giving each other updates. And then of course a venue that can accommodate your group. And then we moved on to a co-op. Because as the kids grew older and then people really started homeschooling, we needed something more substantial for our children. Like, I'm not an expert at culinary arts, but I knew a mom who was. And so we invited this mom to teach baking to our children, and she was fantastic at it, something that I could not do, or the other moms. And so what happened was we just decided at the beginning of when we started the co-op, let's get together, let's plan, let's come up with something more formal for our children. It still happened just once a week, but then we discussed, what do we want to cover for the quarter? Do we want to cover speech class for our older children, or culinary arts, or maybe art theory? And then we just identified what the strengths of the moms were. Because moms, they quit their jobs, but they're so highly capable and they have many talents. And when they start homeschooling their kids, they become really passionate about teaching. And they actually want to share their talents with the other moms and the kids. And so it becomes a cooperative thing where everyone just, we help each other out. And so this one requires meeting together to plan it, because you can't over-exhaust a single mom. Like, okay, you're going to teach culinary arts this quarter, and you're also going to be teaching math, and it's not fair. So what we do is we meet together and we decide who's going to handle what class for this quarter, and then next quarter we can rotate. You don't have to teach, we'll get somebody else to teach. So as it grew bigger, we just assigned different tasks to different moms, and if you're not teaching, you can help assist. And we tell people who join this co-op, if you're going to join, you have to be a contributor. You can't just send your kids and leave them and expect that other moms are going to take care of your kids. You have to help out somehow. And this keeps it sustainable. And then when it comes to fees, we all rent a room together in our church building. So that's how we keep it sustainable, because no one person can house that many children. I used to do that, and I had to have rules, things like no jumping on the couches and no eating in this area of the house, but I felt like I wasn't being really nice. I was not being flexible enough. And so we decided we'll do it at a church building where it's just tables and chairs and kids can't really destroy anything there. So the primary objective, of course, is to provide enrichment opportunities to homeschool families and experiences where children can learn from one another and with each other. And as the children move up in their levels, it becomes really important for them to have group learning experiences. Because they need, you teach them character traits when they're in your home, but sometimes to apply these character traits, they need to be with people that won't always like them, or will also challenge them, because like our son is top dog in our house. I mean, he's like the best at everything. But then he gets together with these other kids at the co-op, and then it's humbling for him in a good way, because he realizes, well, I'm not the best at math, or I'm not the best at basketball, and I get pushed in a positive way by these other kids that I'm with. So that's been beneficial, and parents appreciate that. We mounted a musical, and there was a mom who was really good at teaching music and directing plays, and she put that together for our kids. These are just some of the photos of the children. Now, what are the co-op requirements? You also will need an initiator. So someone who's burdened to gather families together, and then someone who will also be organized to communicate changes in plans, or say, okay, we got to meet. We've gone through the quarter. Let's meet for the next quarter and strategize. Do we need to remove people who are not doing a good job as teachers? And there have been times where I've had to facilitate discussions among moms, because moms get really invested emotionally. And there were instances when some of the moms, there was conflict, and they didn't want to talk about it. And so I said, no, we're going to sit down and we're going to discuss this, because moving forward, this is going to be healthier for all of us. And it's important that we resolve these conflicts. So I said, how can I improve first? And I think that's always important when you're leading a co-op. The people need to know that you're willing to change. And so I said to them, look, how can I improve? I know I could have done better in this area. Will you forgive me for not being as present maybe in some of the meetings as you would have liked me to be? And then I asked each one of them, how do you think we can improve as a group moving forward, what can we do better? And if we have issues with one another, let's bring it up lovingly here, because we all care about each other. And this is a positive environment, and we want to make sure that we iron out these issues, because we're not going to have a healthy co-op if we don't do so. Okay, and then the venue, like I said, it will matter, because once you start breaking up into smaller groupings where you have different levels, we don't necessarily do like a single age group. We do groups. So maybe 0 to 3 years old, and then maybe 4 to 6. And you can't sometimes have them all in one class because they're distracting. So we try to find different, like a venue with different rooms that we can rent. That's a photo of some of the moms in our co-op. They all look happy, right? Like we all get along. So, okay. Then an online community has also helped. This was begun by another mom, a friend of ours, and from like nobody in a year and a half, it grew to about 5,000 members. And it's been very helpful, because sometimes homeschool moms don't necessarily want to get out of their house. It's convenient to be at home. So having an online community for support where they can share their ideas or ask questions has been very beneficial. So this is the page. And sometimes they'll post articles there that they've read that they feel like will benefit other moms, or they'll say, hey, does anybody want this, grade 3 math curriculum that I won't be using anymore? So it just makes families and parents feel like there's a community of support that I can access 24/7. And it doesn't matter whether I'm, in Manila or Quezon City or somewhere around the Philippines. I can constantly ask questions and get help if I need it. I didn't add it here, but with the co-op, you do have to come up with rules. And I do have a list of rules, but I can't post it here because it's going to be too long to cover it. But it's important to discuss those rules and to revisit them ever so often. And even with a online community, you have to have rules, because some people will abuse the space, and they may start advertising their business in a way that kind of offends people. So you have to have a moderator who will say, okay, can you please stop posting that kind of information? And so rules will be important when the communities become more formal. So that's it. Yeah.
Joy, thank you. Bev, do you want to go next?
I don't know if I want to go next. I kind of feel like I should say, what she said. I'm finished homeschooling, so I don't. I'm not involved in support groups right now. I am involved in supporting support group leaders, but not necessarily starting support groups right now. As an organization, Manitoba Association of Christian Homeschools does not run support groups. We will help people start one, but we don't actually run them. I know that in other areas like Ontario, which is a big province in Canada, they actually run support groups. They have their whole province divided up into regions, and they have a regional representative who organizes activities specific to that region, which is really neat. I think it's really nice to have that kind of thing. In Manitoba, what we do is we actually are very grassroots. Group of people in one area will start a group, and once they get to a certain size, they're closed. They don't take any more people in, which can be a problem for a new homeschooler wanting to join a group and there's no group. So there's where we step in. We would step in and we would try and find a couple of other moms in that area and get them together in a neutral place and see if we can get them to organize themselves. Homeschool support is important. Moms, I know you've got social media now. Back when I started, there was no such thing. And the only way we could do this and continue is if we had support from other homeschool moms. Because really, when you're homeschooling, you are different. You are different than the whole society around you, and you need other people to keep encouraging you besides your husband. And hopefully you have your husband's support. But you need these other moms to bounce ideas off of and to share just your struggles and your time, your situation. The things I've wrote, like I said, a lot of them have already been covered. I mentioned this social media. I really like what she said about the social media was really good, but I would caution not to depend totally on social media. It is good for some things, but I think it is very important to spend time face to face, to spend time with other homeschoolers in a group where you feel safe. If you can organize a group that meets often and then can share or have similar interests and can spend time together, whether it's only once a month, that would be better than not at all. Social media, you can be a little bit anonymous, and then you don't get quite the same same support. Some questions considering when you're organizing a support group. I've got a whole long list here. I'm going to run through them. I'm not necessarily going to answer them, but these are things that you have to think of when you're organizing a support group. So, purpose and goals or vision. If you're only getting together for play groups, that's your purpose. But if you're getting together for something else, you need to have an idea of what your purpose is so that you can keep referring back to it. We've mentioned that many times in the last 2 days. But you need a vision so that you can continue in that direction as a group. Do you want to limit membership? I mentioned that some of these groups tend to get to a size where they say, that's it, we're closed. And then next year, if somebody drops out, they'll say, oh, we're open for somebody to come in. You can almost apply to see if you fit into our group. Groups should be based on, or can be, on specific homeschool philosophy, religion, geographic location, or curriculum. Like Leigh said, her groups are based on curriculum. There's others that are based on geography. Most of us are based on geography if we're in a physical support group. If you're in a virtual support group, there is no limit as your geography, but there is a limit maybe in what your philosophy of education is. What services will your group offer? Will events be fellowship-oriented, parent-oriented, activity, or child-centered? So if the support is for the whole family, you would get together as a family. We have support groups in our area that meet on every Friday night at a gym because the dads want to be involved. So the dads play games with the kids and organized activities and sports, and the moms tend to spend time together with each other getting that support they need. So it meets a lot of needs. Or they're doing something with the littler ones, because the littler ones tend to get in the way when you're trying to play basketball. Who will do the work in your group? We've already mentioned that you have to have the different people that are going to organize and who have to have a division of labors. Otherwise, it's too much for one person. If one person is doing all the work, your support group will fall apart in about a year or two. How will you communicate? Now, that's not a big issue nowadays. Back in the old days, we did phone. Now you've got so many different options with Facebook and with email. How leadership is established and what is its role? So are you going to have elections? Or is it just based on, like most of us, who is ever willing to let their name be put on there? And if you're going to be doing organizing activities that requires collecting fees, you're going to need to talk about how you're going to handle money, because that can be an issue as well. And sometimes you have to organize new support groups. If you're in a situation where you want to start a new group, you might want to plan for that, because as I mentioned, support groups can get too big, and you might have to split off. Or you want to reach new homeschoolers, and you want to offer activities. Okay, I'm just going to skip through some of this because we've talked about most of that. The other thing I wanted to mention, we are seeing a change in homeschooling. Parents make this decision a lot earlier than they did in the past. Before, when you thought about homeschooling, you thought about it when your kid was old enough to go into kindergarten or grade 1. Now parents are thinking of it when they've got newborns or 1-year-olds or 2-year-olds. And what happens is they think, oh yes, I'm going to do this. I'm home with my child. They're 1 year old. I'm going to homeschool. And then the child turns 2, and 2.5, and all their friends are starting to talk about getting their name into the preschool because, there's a waiting list. And, we need to have our 3-year-old in preschool so that she can get into the really good kindergarten when she turns 5. And they're starting to think, oh, well, maybe I should be putting my child in preschool. And we kind of lose them because they go from thinking of homeschooling to thinking that they have to get their kid into the right preschool. And once they're in preschool, well, you wouldn't want to take them away from their friends, would you? So we have to think about reaching these homeschool possibilities sooner and showing them that it's okay to keep your kids at home. You don't have to put them in preschool. In fact, most of the research on preschool is showing that there is no benefit to preschool in children once they reach school age. There is no academic benefit to early education. In fact, in some studies, they found that there is a detriment to it, especially in upper middle class families. There's a detriment to sending your children to preschool. They actually suffer socially and academically and don't catch up until about grade 4. So keeping your kids home isn't bad. It's actually really good for them. And later education is actually good for them. Giving your children an opportunity to play is way better than teaching them to read at 3 and 4. Little side on, I have a little passion for that one. But because of that, we need to start thinking about organizing activities or groups for parents of preschoolers. Really noticed this with my daughter. When her first 2 were preschoolers, she really felt a need to socialize with other families that were planning to homeschool because all of her friends were sending their kids off to preschool and she couldn't plan play dates because they were never home. And so she took the opportunity at our conference to put out a sign-up list for anybody that wanted to join her in starting a preschool playgroup. And she started this group, and it actually morphed into several groups because there were so many of them. And then it has grown up to the point now where those ones have grown up to be homeschool groups, and we are looking at starting another group to start with those younger ones. So that was the one thing I wanted to do. So as homeschool organizations, you can play a role in providing homeschoolers with the help they need by facilitating connections between like-minded homeschoolers. Initiating the startup and organizing the structure may be all that's needed to get them going. Like I said, we don't keep them going, we get them started. Homeschoolers are independent people. They can manage their own groups if we keep giving them the support as an organization. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev and Leigh and Joy. We have 2 other presenters after our coffee break. So let's take a break. Coffee is up. Coffee and second lunch, as the hobbits would say, is up on the 10th floor. So let's take a half-hour break. We'll come back here at 3 o'clock and continue on with the last 2 parts of support groups and other questions. So enjoy your break. We'll come back together at 3. I know that there's still probably some people that are enjoying their break, but they'll be late. So I'd like to ask Vicki if you can come up. Vicki Dincher is from Pennsylvania and has been involved in, as a homeschool mom, involved in support groups of various kinds. And Vicki, we're just really glad you're here and looking forward to your sharing of some of the things that you think that organizations can do in terms of supporting, growing, building, encouraging support groups.
Thank you. And I have a video or a PowerPoint. That's the teacher in me. I'm still teaching. All 4 of my children have graduated from homeschool and college and are gainfully employed. My last one is getting married, but I still teach homeschooling children online. So this is the teacher in me with the PowerPoint here. And I'm here mainly to validate the things that Joy and Bev have already said, and to add just a little bit to what I call family schools. That's something that I have been involved in. I've been teaching at co-ops for about 22 years now. So I figure out how to work this. Where do I point it? There we go. Had to turn it on. Thank you. Nope. There it is. Okay. So co-ops. What are co-ops? Well, we look at them as a group of like-minded homeschooling families working for common goals. They can be anything from very small groups. I've been involved, the first co-op that I was ever involved in was in my home. There started with 2 families, grew to about 5 families, and then we got so large that we had to find a place other than our home to have it in. The picture here on the right is of our family school. There are about 75 families, about 180 to 200 students that come to that once a week. They can be once a week, once every other week, once a month, anything from play groups, as have been mentioned, on up. So what I want to talk about a little more detail, since co-ops have been covered really well, the small play group kind of co-op to having classes, is more of the family school. With the in your home kind of co-op, having all of the moms participate, I mean, it's a very inexpensive way to get moms with other expertise together to help educate your children. But when my kids got to about middle school, and I realized I'm a science teacher, I love science and math, I have my master's in biology, but I didn't feel like I could do English very well for my middle school and high school students, so then I met up with Deborah Bell, who, lo and behold, teaches English. And so we decided to start swapping expertise, as it was. So with the weekly classes, the one that I have been involved with, both Deborah and I taught for this co-op, it's Creative Home Educator Support Services. And it is a weekly family school where the parents will pay for classes, 1 class, 3 class, 5 classes, depending on what they're looking for their children. Most of the students that I taught, their moms might have felt comfortable with teaching English, but not so comfortable teaching science. So I got a lot of their students. I, on the other hand, was not so comfortable teaching English, so I put all of my children into Deb's class. And you can see this is I ran this co-op for about 3 years as the administrator, and really how it works is 1 or 2 women or men, moms or dads, will work as the administrators of a co-op like this, and they will actually find teachers, other homeschooling parents who have expertise in a certain subject matter, either by training, by education, or by desire to know more about that subject. And then we would arrange it by age group. Now the co-op currently was originally structured to teach 5th through 12th grade, but we had so many families with younger children who didn't have anything to do during that time that we now have classes. There's some preschool classes all the way up through 12th grade. And we rent a church that had previously had like a Christian school in it, that they were no longer using it. So we rent the building from them pretty economically, but then the cost of the classes covers the rent of the facility along with paying the teachers a nominal fee to be able to administrate a class. So the teachers, what we would do is we would provide once a week educational experience for the students with hands-on things to do, and then provide them with homework that they would do at home with their parents for the rest of the week. And I have some pictures here. One of the things that is really nice about this kind of a structured co-op or family school is that you have a lot of collaborative experiences for the students available. These are some pictures of science fairs that we've had. You can see my biology class. The students are dissecting a fetal pig there, which a lot of moms were very happy that I did that with their students because they didn't want to have to do that in their kitchen. So we did that. We'd have science fair. My students in my physics class would take balloon poppers and they would work together to create machines to pop balloons. And it was, the students just really love this sort of a thing. Also, we would have, because the co-op was so large with about 180 to 200 students, we had sports teams and drama experiences. We were very fortunate to have a mom who is a gifted drama teacher, and we've put on some amazing performances of Seussical and some big name musicals with the kids. And we also have a basketball team. We did have soccer teams. We have volleyball teams, and they would play against other Christian schools. So we would have parents that would come in and take those tasks on with organizing that all under the heading of the family school. We also would have writing competitions, project fairs. We even had a yearbook where the students could actually get the experience that they would have had if they were in a public school environment, to be able to put together. They would take the pictures, put the quotes and the things in it, and it was something that they really enjoyed. We have great art teachers. There are so many talented homeschool moms that it's just so much fun to be able to put them into those places where they can shine. And we've had award-winning art projects and award-winning writing projects with even our local newspaper would have some competitions, and our students would win prizes from it. So it was great. Also, field trips and formals. These are the other things that having a larger school can provide for your students. These are, we've taken large bus trips to New York City, and we've gone to see Broadway musicals in New York. We've taken other field trips, and we were able to have parent-monitored, very appropriate formals for our children to be able to be involved in and feel like they were not missing out on anything that the kids in the neighborhood got to be a part of. So I think you could ask any of our students and they would feel that they were able to really experience all of the good of a school in that one day a week with very little of the bad. One of the other things that's really great about this kind of a co-op is that you can provide a student recognition night where the students are actually given awards for their academic achievements and certificates for participation in different classes, different things like that. And we also have a graduation. So there's a way that our high school seniors can then come together and the parents present the diplomas to their students. It's a beautiful thing. Our students have all decided to write thank you letters to their parents. And then the MC, I've been the MC for about 14 years, and I have to get the letters about a week beforehand so I can cry through them before I read them in public. But it's a wonderful way to really give kids a sense of accomplishment in what they have done, because it provides them an audience outside of the family, which I think is a really good thing for them to have. So how do you get started? Well, this is the Chess website. It's a free Google site. So Google Sites are free. I recommend setting up any information that you need for dissemination to your families on a Google site. Of course, social media has been talked about quite a bit already. Facebook groups has been talked about. Google Docs is a great free resource also that you can use for collaboration. I have my students use that in my classes even today to collaborate on things. And for sharing information with other families in a co-op, Google Docs is a great resource. You can get the families together to actually share resources. This is, and with the co-ops that I've been a part of, we would have a curriculum night where you could pass curriculum back and forth between we're done with our 3rd grade curriculum, we could easily hand that off to somebody, and I could get 5th grade curriculum if I needed it. So these are great ways to support and care for other homeschooling families near you. Share expertise. Like I mentioned, moms would come forward, and dads. We've had quite a few dads teaching classes at the co-op, which is great. The kids love having a dad teacher. It's kind of interesting because the moms are all looking like, why are so many kids taking his class? But I think there's really something about having dads in a classroom that means a lot to the students. One of the things, though, when you are setting up something like this is to be very clear about what your goals are and your expectations. What kind of a co-op will it be? Is it one that all of the moms will, much like Joy had mentioned, participate in? You can teach one semester and assist the next semester, that kind of thing. Or is it one where you're going to pay a fee and then have your child take classes depending on what the family's needs are? And then, of course, finding the venue, a place to actually meet and be able to divide up into classes and have that. Our facility had a gym, so it allowed us to have a lot of different opportunities. The last thing I was going to mention are associations. The Harrisburg Area Homeschoolers Association is the association that I had been a part of the board on, and an association is different than a co-op, but it's also a very great support system. And again, they had a website that they used, and they used mainly an email way of disseminating information. And the association, we would put together lists of co-ops in the area so new families could find where they might be able to join with a co-op, large co-ops, small co-ops, free ones with charges. All of that information is made available to them. There's a small membership fee for this. I think it's $25 for the year, and that includes a family picnic. All the homeschool families that are a member of the association get together once a year in August for a picnic and get to meet other families. It's a great way of really getting to see who in your community is also homeschooling. One thing I didn't mention was that most of the time the families that pooled together we found each other in church. So if you don't have a ready access spot where you can find other like-minded homeschooling families, the association is a great way. If you can start an association and get interested people to give their emails, then it's a great way to put people together. And that, I believe, is it.
Thank you, Vicki. We're going to take questions at the end once we're done them all, and then we'll have all the presenters come up. Tracy. Tracy is with the Homeschool Foundation, a homeschool mom of 8? 7, sorry. Okay. And you do count the granddaughter. And Tracy's been certainly involved in many different support groups, a conference speaker, and just, Tracy, really appreciate your perspective on how important support is.
I actually was going amen, 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 amen to each of the moms that got up and spoke, and my experience is so similar. I was just particularly encouraged when Joy shared, because she's, I don't know, much younger than me. I'm an old woman now, but with grandchildren, but her experience has been so similar to mine. We're talking 25, 30 years ago. So it's very refreshing and encouraging to hear that the nature of support groups have stayed the same. We didn't have the online stuff, the social media and all of that, so that's all a new area. But instead of talking about what some of these moms have shared, I'll highlight on a couple things that they shared, but I just want to talk about a few other considerations. So this is just really short, maybe some things that will spur some questions that you might have as we go into the question and answer session. Vicki, I wish I had met you years ago. I love hearing your story because my experience with support groups started back in 1994, being involved in a church that had a lot of homeschooling families, but there was no support group for those families. And in fact, the families that were the older families than my family had been completely burned out because they had done all the work year after year. So there hadn't been any support group functioning in the church of about 95 families for about 4 or 5 years. So Chris and I started a support group in our church, and it was really a lot of fun because I like doing the organizational thing probably more than being a teacher. I actually like administration and organization and that. But so that was a great experience for our children growing up that addresses the socialization issues, but does it in a way that maintains your primary involvement as parents in your children's lives. And so that's the first point I wanted to leave with you, is that whatever you set up, be very careful that you don't try to replace the role of the parents in the lives of their children. That's what makes homeschooling so incredibly successful, is that parents are day in and day out directly involved. For our family, what worked best was we didn't get our kids involved in classes until they were older. Because I wanted to be with them when they were little, in those formative years when you're working on character and habits and skills and foundational educational ideas, all the basics you want to establish well when they're young. But yes, if you have older children, are experiencing as they get older, you're feeling your inability to maybe teach the science or the math or the foreign language, and so I literally would pray for opportunities for my kids to learn these things, and God would always provide them, whether it was an art teacher or a Spanish teacher or a daughter who wanted to learn French and there was no French teacher, and then God just brought one she was fluent, she'd lived in France, she studied in France, she was a homeschool mom, and so my daughter was able to take 4 years of French with her and thoroughly loved it. And so I wanted to mention something that Bev shared earlier about the whole idea of the preschool enrollment for your children. And I'm so glad that you took the time to talk about that, Bev, because I think with the huge increase of co-ops and then the online communities, I am seeing from speaking at homeschool conferences a growing trend in moms lacking some confidence with their younger children. Maybe they haven't had the training, or maybe they didn't come from a family where their mother was involved in their life as a child. And so there's a real opportunity for you to mentor other mothers who have little children, to befriend them, to provide opportunities to come together, but to encourage them in their role. The most significant impact I think you can make in a child's life are those really early years. They may not be able to articulate it even when they become adults, but I know my kids have enough memories of when they were young and how important my involvement in their lives was in shaping who they are today. They're all adults now. A couple other things I wanted to talk about maybe as opportunities and also as some cautions is just the area of the social media and the online communities. I'm witnessing it's an incredible opportunity for families to find instant help for specific questions they might have. It's amazing that they can post a question on online, it's a closed group even, and then they'll get 150 comments and instantly, like they could have a question at 11:30 at night, and they'll get answers to their needs. It's an incredible resource. It's sort of like having a brainstorming session in a way, because you can look at all the different options and sort of figure out what's best for your family. But the other thing that I've observed, and quite frequently actually in these online communities, is there are, without clearly established rules and clearly establish values that you want to uphold, those forums can become opportunities for moms to complain, particularly about their marriage, and so it's marriage is, as you all know, is very much under attack, not just in the United States but around the world. And so these forums, these online groups, it's if you create one of these, I think it's important to uphold an environment, a positive, supportive environment where marriages are upheld and honored, and take the issues and concerns you have and go to somebody privately about that, in a council or whatever, and not make it an opportunity to air that or your children's struggles. That's the other thing that I see, that my kids, now that they're adults, have given me the feedback, Mom, you talked about this situation. I'm so embarrassed. Why did you do that? And so I've grown, as my kids have gotten older, to realize that I've needed to respect them for their individuality and for who they are. And so those online forums need to be a positive place for our children to not, for us to not, or moms to not sort of publicly make known the struggles and the problems. Now, that being said, the few other things I wanted to just mention with any group, whether it's an in-person group or an online group, that you have an opportunity to encourage moms to be who God made them to be. Their moms are more dedicated to their children than anybody else. Moms and dads are more dedicated to their own children than anybody else is going to be. And so your number one job, if you're encouraging families, is to encourage them to follow how they feel as a family is what is best for their children, and to constantly support their freedom to do that, because they're going to feel, the more they look at what other people are doing, the more they read and hear the discussions, it's very easy, depending on the personality, if anyone like mine, to look at all of those and to get overwhelmed and to feel, oh, I need to do this, oh, I need to be like that, oh, I need, and then they can't hear their own voice anymore, their own sense of call with their own children. So keep encouraging families to do what they feel is best for their children. They have a good sense. They know their children, love their children better than anyone else can. And then also encourage moms, particularly since they're the primary ones that need the support, to not feel like they have to be part of the hip group or the thing that's being done, and to get their identity from those things. It kind of goes along with encouraging them to do what God's called them to do. Just in closing, I wanted to share just a couple of personal stories about our experience with support groups and how meaningful they've been in our children's lives. And one is Vicki talked about graduation, and our little group had a graduation every year. Some years there were 5 students, some years there were 20 students. The year my oldest daughter graduated, my husband Chris, who was speaking at homeschool conferences regularly, it was convention season, could not be there for the graduation. We didn't have any say over, could you please change the date of the graduation so my husband could be there? And he had made the commitment to speak, a year in advance. So what we did, I was there and all her siblings were there, but then my husband called in on the phone and they put it on the microphone, and so he got to speak to Bethany at her own graduation. It was a parent-led graduation where the parents give the diploma, and then they speak a word of blessing over their children and what they were thankful for in the homeschooling experience. So that was a big surprise to Bethany, who doesn't normally get teary-eyed, and she's quite teary-eyed to hear her father sharing his heart with her, even if it was over the phone. And so those graduations are very memorable moments in your child's life, and an opportunity to commend and celebrate their achievement and hard work. And then one other story I'll share with you in closing is I was a music major in college, so, and I have been, since I was very, very little, second grade all the way until my first was born, I was in choirs, and I've always loved being in choir. And it was my dream to be able, one day, to be able to direct a homeschool choir, because most homeschool children don't have that opportunity to be in a choir and get that kind of instruction. So I waited until my kids were old enough to be in the choir, and then all of my children were able to be in my homeschool choir. But never, so the whole idea of parents getting involved and sharing their gifts is one of the most wonderful ways to have a co-op or a support group, because not only are you sharing your gifts, but you are a mentor in a child's life. And as much as we have to offer our children, God uses other like-minded parents to have a role in influencing your children in a positive, wonderful, maybe life-changing, life-lasting way. I had one young man in my choir who was in it for 3 years, and he graduated from high school, and he loved it so much, he asked if he could keep being in my choir for another year as a college student, which I let him. I made an exception. But he just graduated this year with a degree in choral studies because of being in my choir. And so I thank God that, maybe most of the kids in my choir just kind of came and went and, enjoyed it. But to touch a life who's changed forever, and he's an amazing director. He's so much better than me. He's so gifted. But that's where the student will become greater than the teacher. That's what we want for our children, don't we? So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tracy. What I'd like to ask, while I turn the lights up here, or try to, is for the presenters in this session, if you can come up and join me here at the front. We'd just like to open up the floor for questions. And so if you have any questions about support groups, and I suspect questions about other things, we got the real experts up here. So, Bev, I'm just going to pass you the mic.
Yep.
It's on. So my question is for Vicki. This is a question for your homeschool cooperative that was very large. As any organization grows, decision-making can become a challenge. It's harder to represent for the entire group. So I'm just curious what your decision-making structure was for that organization that became very large.
It's a good question. We did have a board, and we had a pastor from a church that was actually not the church we rented, but his church became like an umbrella for the organization. So we would have board meetings, and we would have several of the parents would serve on the board to make sure that they had a voice in how the organization was run. It was structured more as a for-profit kind of an organization. So although having said that, it was still very much parent-led, because the parents would be involved. They would stay, even though their kids would be taking classes. We actually would, in the gym, we have an area where the moms would meet for prayer and things like that. So we would meet usually twice a year as a board and make those kinds of decisions. We were held to about 200 students simply because of the size of the building. So I don't know if things would look different if it was even larger than that, but we had about, I believe it was 7-member board, and that was pretty effective in handling any kind of things that would come up and making those decisions.
Other questions?
Hello. If somebody can tell me which is the best way to involve other relatives in the process of homeschooling, because now I live in Colombia. I live in Colombia is in South America, and we have the decision to homeschool our kids. I have 3 kids, and we have a lot of reactions and resistance from our family, for example, the grandmothers, other relatives that have that I don't know, that resistance. So for me, it will be very helpful to learn with you which is the best way to handle those situations. If it's possible.
So who'd like to comment on that? We have, why don't you take that one there?
You know, with what I tried to do with, let's say, not necessarily family, but maybe friends who kind of didn't understand the whole idea of homeschooling, was first to invite them to see what we did in the co-op. Because then they would develop relationships with the other moms. And when you're team teaching as moms, they see, oh, this is how a mom would teach maybe their child in the home, and it's very natural, it's very relaxed. And we would start them off at the younger levels. And so the moms would get together, they would see each other teach, and then it was non-threatening to them. And then that's when they would start to ask questions. So what was your, because sometimes if it's just me explaining to everybody, it makes a difference if there's other moms there who are homeschooling, and then you invite these people who are skeptical to just kind of see what you guys are doing as a group. And then they realize, well, this isn't just for my weird cousin, or, then they begin to see that, well, this is something that I can do also. And it's very natural. And these moms have such a great relationship with their children. And so maybe, do you guys have other suggestions?
If you can become a part of a co-op, like Joy was mentioning, and then in our student recognition night, we would have project fairs and student recognition nights where we would invite all of the family to come, and it gave them a real clear picture of just how important education was to the kids, and what good kids they really were. And they could see that it wasn't just, oh yeah, that's my weird grandchild, why are they so different than everybody else? And they could see that they really aren't, and that there was a whole lot of education and socialization was going on, so that gave them a little better feel for it.
But since you guys are new, you may not have co-ops or friends around, so you have a different issue. And so that's how it was for us, because we began so long ago. And I remember my mother was so angry, so her eyes got like out of her head angry. And there was nothing she could do about it. They were our children. But I think what won her over was that we were a very close family, and we kept including them in everything that we could. And they saw the difference. And I'm the oldest of 4, and all my other siblings went on to have children, and all of them are homeschooled. And you could see like 5, and my mom never became a Christian. But by the time, like, our oldest was maybe 6 or 8, and the other ones were coming along, it changed. And she was like, well, my grandchildren are homeschooled. So it just keep loving them. Just love them. That's all you can do.
I also found that being very intentional in reaching out, sharing a paper or something that your child has written, something created they've done, their artwork. But what really won my parents over was seeing the character that my children had. And a lot of the arguments against homeschooling they heard, like, what about socialization? They saw my children were comfortable in a wide variety of settings. They could communicate with adults. They didn't give in to peer pressure like the rest of the, other families they knew. There's other grandchildren, and so that really made a big impression. But also, as Leigh shared, just loving your parents and family where they are, because it's a journey they have to make, an educational journey, to see how natural and how beautiful and fruitful a homeschooling lifestyle is.
I'll add one more thing. And just for words for them too, is to remind them that, Mom and Dad, you taught me so much about love, and so you gave me such a great family that I just want to do it more and more. And and it comes from you, is why I have this idea, so they don't feel, because they can feel like they're attacked. Like, what did I do? Raise you wrong? That you don't want to do it the same way I did it? Right, exactly. So we got to include them.
Exactly.
One of the things that we do in Manitoba is that grandparents come free to our conference. Not grandparents that are homeschooling their children, but grandparents whose grandchildren are being homeschooled. We don't get a huge number, but we get them, and they come and they got questions like, "Are they going to turn out all right? Like, is this legal? Like, and and they're good questions. So we have a session where we answer those. And if you want to talk about that kind of thing, Barb and Rich are the ones that have a ministry that they're the guys that are doing that big time. Alberto, you want to?
I just want to make a comment here, and that is because my wife went through the same experience. So the worst enemy that my wife had when we decided to homeschool was my mother-in-law. And she said, as you were mentioning, but then what my wife did against all odds, she invited her to teach our children. She decided to invite her to teach Spanish. And then the first reaction was, what? Yeah, and then she accepted, and she just, because at the beginning she got the impression that our kids were not learning anything. She thought that they were crazy, that they were not like the other cousins. And she accepted, and she is the best promoter of homeschooling.
Irina.
I'm sure some of you had these comments, and that whenever a child misbehaves, some people say, "Oh, sure, because that's because child is homeschooled, he's not in school." So, how do you deal with this kind of criticism?
Their children are all perfect, but they knew some people who dealt with this, so they'll.
My children didn't disobey. No. One of the things you have to sort of figure out a little bit different strategy, because I realized after homeschooling several years, it's like part of the problem is that we are with each other 24/7. You never get a break, and so we see everything all the time, and so. Internally, there's a lot of character development going on, of showing grace to one another, of because one sibling can see the weakness of another sibling so well, and then there's the issue of you as a parent deciding what is most important to address, because you're with them 24/7, so you can feel like you have to address every single problem every single time. I've done that. I just speak from experience, and I had to correct every fault and and then the home becomes a place where it's extremely stressful and discouraging to the child, and so I had to learn to pick your issues very carefully, and then there's plenty of statistics out there that show that other kids who aren't homeschooled disobey and have issues. So that kind of thinking is not logical at all. I mean, it doesn't bear true. So, just ask somebody to think about their childhood. Didn't they disobey when they were growing up too? We all did. All of us did as children. So it's part of the journey of learning to accept choices and the responsibility for them, the consequences for them, and showing grace at the same time too while they're growing up.
And I think, this has happened. I don't have perfect children. Maybe they do. But there have been times where, let's say, a mom or somebody will point out something that my child did. And what I try to do is say, I thank you for letting me know. Because I'll talk to my child. And I think when they see that as a mom, you're intentional. Because as homeschooling moms, we are intentional. We want to make sure that our children grow up with godly character. But we don't have perfect kids. So if somebody's going to correct us or point out a fault in our children, what I would tell them is, I think I really appreciate that for time. What else did they do? So I can speak to them later and address it. But I really appreciate you noticing that, because I do want to improve as a mom. And I think that maybe catches them off guard, because they're thinking, you're going to be offended or defensive about your homeschooling choice. But it's just showing them, I want to be an intentional mother. So I appreciate the correction. Yeah.
Other questions?
Hi, I'm from Colombia, and I lead a group, and I feel a little bit responsible to work hard and make possible groups for the kids of Angelica, so they interact, and she has something to show to her family. But I have a question. I've heard about all of your experience, And I feel that the groups you are telling us about are very homogeneous. Like you speak about finding like-minded moms. And what about diversity? Do you have diversity in your groups? Do you look for diversity, or is better not to have that much diversity? Because we're beginning. We are an open group. We receive all kinds of family. We want that everybody feels that can be in our group if they want to. We don't have a focus on religion or politics or kind of childcare, motherhood. We try to be neutral, impartial, so everybody can feel that are welcome. That makes that the people who want to be together in a play date are different from each other, and I don't see that in your groups.
Can you say anything?
Well, you got to remember that we were talking about support groups, and usually like-minded people support one another. So predominantly, that's what's going to happen with most of us anyways, correct? So, but it doesn't have to be that way. And part of it, what you're hearing, is we are older, and it was mostly Christians who were homeschooling at the time we were running our support groups. So you're going to have, maybe as a younger woman, more diversity, you too. I know for our program in Classical Conversations, anybody can join, and so we actually have very many lesbians, Wiccans, American Indian spiritualists. We have people that don't know what they think or believe. So they're always welcome to join our programs. It's just the leadership's going to set the tone. And if the leadership is looking for a Christian experience or whatever experience for their own children, that's going to tend to be what that support group is going to be about. So what you're doing is actually very common in the United States now, because there is such a diversity of people homeschooling. It just wasn't our experience when we were leading a lot of the programs, and it is changing very rapidly. Probably in yours you're starting to see it too. So we still like those people.
Yeah. I can't speak from my personal experience, but my daughter has been involved with a group that is multicultural. They started as a choir and have moved to adding French language and dance, and I can't remember what else they do now. And what happens usually is, if it's big enough and they've got teachers that are doing the skills with the children, the mothers sit around and visit, and they tend to congregate in groups based on who they're comfortable with, because there's too many of them for 30 moms to sit together and talk. So they tend to congregate in 3 and 4, and they tend to find the people that they feel comfortable with. They do intermingle, but if you do have a group like that, you will need to have specific guidelines for behavior. Based on a Christian background, we tend to have very similar ideas of what kind of behavior we expect from our children and from our adults. But when you get in a multicultural group, you don't have the same kind of expectation. The language, the behavior of the children, even the language of the children can be an issue for your children. And so you need to choose carefully if this support group is going to benefit you, or are you going to go home and have to unschool all that stuff that they've learned in that 1 hour or 2 hours. So consider that too.
Yeah, although my youngest is 23, I did run that co-op until last year, was my last year there. So although it started with a group of like-minded individuals, because I think that's the easiest way to be able to agree on things and get things actually working, it's now very multicultural. We've got quite a few different family origin types coming, and that sort of thing. So that's not something that we made a specific decision to not include diversity. But I think you have to be intentional as to what the goal of your group is. If it's educational, then everybody needs to be like-minded on what you see as an educational goal. that sort of a thing. So I think you need to just, I mean, when we say like-minded, I think it's based on the things that we want to see happen within that co-op, not necessarily who can attend, that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Any other questions?
We are from São Paulo, and we were one of the 5 families doing homeschooling until last year, and now we are 30. So we have a problem. We have to make a group urgently. So what can you give of information to start a group, to prepare, to train mothers and fathers to act as a group? How to start?
You need one person or 2 people to be an organizer, I think. I mean, once you get your organizer leaders, then I think starting to make a list as to who is gifted in different areas, what are your interests and expertise, and then allowing, people to voice their ideas. I would love to see my children take a class in cooking, and then that someone can do that. So it just kind of comes out of the people who want to have this for their children. You get 1 or 2 people who can lead it, and then it kind of will happen on its own. It really will.
Yeah, I don't think any of us planned to be the leaders we became. It just happened.
We are in a community that is predominantly Mennonite, and there are many, many, many of them that homeschool. They have over 100 people when they get together. But what they do is they sit down every fall with all the parents, just the parents, and one person sort of initiates the meeting, and then what they do is they lay out the calendar and they say, okay, September, who's going to take care of planning an event for September? October, who's planning? And they get a couple of couples to say they'll take it on, and they can do whatever they want. But they have to plan it, they have to send out the invitations, they have to get the facility, they have to plan the whole event. And they do everything from, well, for us anyway, skating, gym nights, tobogganing parties, field trips to Winnipeg, which is an hour and a half away. They'll plan the whole field trip, including, making the arrangements for the group and letting everybody know how much, and then they collect all the names and the like. It's not one person doing it all. You can spread it out. And if it's, 2 couples that are planning it, it's not, you've got 4 people so somebody's going to actually do it.
Anyone else? Isn't it great to have experts?
I talked to somebody, he's a moderator on a Facebook group. I see your, I don't know.
Joy?
Joy. You are moderator of a Facebook group of 5,000.
I'm not. My friend is, yeah.
So is it one moderator? Because
No.
I talked to somebody, they've got a group of 1,800, they've got 3 moderators, and it's quite a lot of work.
No. No, she started off as one, and then as the group grew, she spread out the work, and so she has about 3 or 4 for this site. But then even from this site, they became smaller pocket groups. So then they started another Facebook group for maybe the early ages, the early years. And so as it grew, and then people stepped up and said, maybe I'll moderate a group for the earlier years or for the middle school years. And so I think it would just kind of happen organically. But you're right, that's a good question, because one person moderating it, they won't be able to homeschool anymore. So they do need help, yeah.
There is a session, I can't remember which day, on...
Tomorrow.
Michelle's doing that one. Yep. Other questions? Our time's almost up. If that's all, ladies, thank you very much. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for your participation today, yesterday, as we've gone through this whirlwind tour of organizational development. Our objective of these 2 days has been to give you a sampling, a taste of some of the things that are involved in growing, starting, developing an organization, whether that be on a national, whether that be on a regional, whether that be on a local level. And I hope that we've been able to provide you with some useful information. I hope that, if nothing else, we've provided you with some faces and some contacts of people that you can talk to as you go through some of the questions that you're going to be facing. And I know that every one of the presenters would be more than glad to get an email from you to say, you talked about this, what about that, to be able to provide that information. So please feel free to access us. The Canadian Centre for Home Education, which is the group that organized these past 2 days, considered as a privilege to be part of this movement. We would like to offer again, if there are any countries, any places that are looking at starting an organization, whether that be a support organization, whether that be a legal organization, we would like to help you and to talk about that. And I know HSLDA US they've offered the same. So if you're starting something and you're just looking for some help, some advice, some encouragement, we would be more than glad to help you. So just get in touch with any of us, and we'd be glad to. The conference is almost ready to start. This has just been the appetizer. So at 6 o'clock this evening on the 10th floor, we have the opening reception for the Global Home Education Conference, because we've just been enjoying the pre-conference so far. 6 o'clock upstairs on the 10th floor. Enjoy your couple of hours off. I noticed that there were some people cooling off in the pool. That sounds very refreshing. Thank you for your attention, for your time, and I'm looking forward to being able to visit with many more of you personally. So thank you.